Hey guys, Brandon Zerby here, and if you followed the personal finance space this year, you know you've heard one word mentioned more than any other. Inflation. In April, the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, rose 4.2%, the fastest since 2008. In May, it rose even higher, eclipsing 5%, and then in June, 5.4%. Excluding food and energy, it's the fastest inflation has grown since September of 1991. And it hasn't slowed down either, as July maintained that 5.4% rate, and then August wasn't much different. And many news sources are now indicating that high inflation rates are now here and persistent to stay for a while. And what this means is that everything is pricier and costs more money. So how do we afford these increased prices? Is there a way to beat inflation? And if you're getting the typical 3% yearly raise, does that mean you're not getting a raise at all once accounting for inflation? Well, let's get into it. The Consumer Price Index is a measure of the change in prices paid by consumers for goods and services, like food, transportation, and shelter. And typically, the United States government aims for a 2% target increase in CPI each year. That means that your typical organic, unsweetened gallon of soy milk that I know you're buying that usually might cost $5 will cost $5.10 next year if the government hits their 2% inflation target. And $3 in gas would rise to $3.06 in the next year. And then on average, all the goods and services that you pay for should rise by that 2% if that target is hit. But due to a myriad of issues stemming from the COVID pandemic, we've seen the economy shut down, supply chain issues happen, and the government printing off tons of stimulus money. And this has raised that inflation level from that target 2% all the way up, exceeding that 5% level now. Now, typically inflation, or the CPI, has risen about 2 to 3% per year, and then wages within the United States has risen about 2 to 3% as well. So for most, this isn't really a raise at all. Sure, you might get a typical 3% raise with your yearly wages, but then inflation may rise 3% as well, and then it negates it and you have really no raise at all. Now, with inflation exceeding 5%, if you were to get the typical 3% raise, it's almost like you're losing money. Now, fortunately, wages have grown faster this year, almost keeping up with inflation. So whether we're dealing with a high inflation environment like today, or we're not, what can we do to stop running on this treadmill without making any progress? So first, let's discuss living below your means and saving money. And if you think you've heard this before, just hold on a second. I think I have a pretty fascinating use case around salary and expenses that you're going to be interested in. So to make the numbers easy, let's just say you're making a $100,000 salary and you get this standard 3% raise. That means you're now making $103,000, $3,000 more than you were before. But if you're living at your means and your expenses are $100,000 per year, inflation's going to hit that at about 3%, and now it's negated the raise. 3% rise in your salary has been negated by that 3% rise in inflation if you're living at your means. But let's just say you were living below your means with expenses at $50,000. That same 3% inflation hits and it only rises your expenses by $1,500. But you still got that same 3% raise in your salary, so you're making $3,000 more. Now, when you thought initially that you had no raise at all, because you're living below your means, you're actually saving $1,500 more than if you were living right at your means. And that's the benefit of living below your means. And as Charlie Munger has said, one of the great defenses to being worried about inflation is not having a lot of silly needs in your life. In other words, if you haven't created a lot of artificial demand to drown in consumer goods, why, you have a considerable defense against the vicissitudes of life. And you know that's a Charlie Munger quote and not mine because he used the word vicissitudes? I actually had to look that up because I didn't really know what it meant. Now, if you were to go even more extreme and live off of $25,000 a year in expenses, then inflation would only rise that about $750 and you'd have a $2,250 raise. It's that simple. So whether or not be getting that large raise that you were hoping for, or inflation rising a lot faster than we expected, cutting your expenses to only what you need to live healthy and happy is a great solution. And the more you cut, the more you benefit. Second, all that money that you're saving by living below your means could be invested in the United States stock market. Traditionally, when inflation has risen, so have companies' profits and revenues. For example, if you have $100,000 in cash, whether it be in a savings account or in a retirement account, with inflation being at 3 to 5%, that $100,000 is going to lose value over time. And this is because typical savings accounts only pay a rate of return less than 1% the past few years. So really, you're losing money by saving money in a high inflation environment. But if you were to invest that $100,000 in the United States stock market, which typically returns about 7 to 10%, now you're beating inflation. You're beating that 3 to 5% inflationary rate. And this is why the stock market is usually considered a great hedge against inflation, because the returns of the stock market are usually greater than the rate of inflation. So in high inflation environments, consider moving more of your money away from traditional savings accounts and more towards investing in the United States stock market, especially if you don't need that money within, say, 3 to 5 years. So here are my final thoughts. Whether it's expenses, dramatically raising your expenses, or your job not providing you that big salary raise that you were hoping for, there are solutions to this problem. First, make sure you're living below your means, because if your expenses equal your income, that's just a recipe for disaster. But if you were to live below your means, you can actually thrive in this high inflation environment. Second, you can take that money that you're saving by living below your means and invest it in the United States stock market, where typically, traditionally, it has beaten the rate of inflation. Now, instead of worrying about your financial future in this high inflation environment, you're actually excelling in it. So much you might actually enjoy rising inflation. Maybe. I'm not really sure. I just said that. It kind of sounded nice. Either way, this has been my plan to live healthier and happier. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel. If you did like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. It lets me know what kind of content I should be producing and really does help the channel out. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll be sure to answer those. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Lastly, I offer a free health kit, which has my top 10 sleep tips, 1 whole foods plant-based recipe, and a mobility workout that you can stream on any device. That is free. There's a link down in the description for that. It also gets you sent to my weekly newsletter, where I provide the 3 most important things I've read, watched, or listened to within the past week. All of that completely free. Link down in the description if you're interested in that. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And tell me you guys saw Tom Brady on opening night football. Let's go!